Okay, quick program note before we start the show. You might hear me mention that we're going to kick it to myself talking with Brandon about recruiting. Brandon is very caught up with San Antonio stuff. So we're actually going to recap everything from all the Under Armour All-American games, all the Bama recruiting stuff, any Ryan Williams news. We're going to do all that on Monday. We're going to have a separate show with Brandon on Monday. So he'll hop on and talk recruiting just with me on Monday. So you'll hear that mentioned, and then it'll cut to Jordan. If you're confused, this program note is to clarify that. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Tide Pod. We have a big show because we have to recap the unfortunate 27-20 loss for Alabama in the Rose Bowl to Michigan. Tony is back, no longer in Pasadena, no longer in beautiful, sunny California. I guess you are in Houston, which is a lot warmer than where I'm at. But
I'm in Houston, but not in Houston the way Alabama fans would have wanted me to be in Houston. I'm just back home for an extra day before heading back to Alabama, not staying in Houston for the national title game this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good point. And obviously Alabama fans disappointed with the result, but obviously you were there in Pasadena, and we have some talking points to get into about this game. We're going to dive into some off-season stuff as well. We'll also talk to Brandon. We're going to get an update from him. He's in San Antonio covering some All-American games stuff, so we'll get some recruiting stuff from him. We're going to talk to Jordan, too, about men's basketball. We got conference play coming up. So plenty to dive into. But, Tony, I think in terms of diving into this game, we should start from the ending because, you know, that's where all kind of the drama went down. The snapping and the, play calling kind of reared their ugly heads again as Alabama's final play with a low snap. Milroe takes into a crowd of Michigan defenders. Wasn't even a chance really at the end of that game. And I feel like that's, one of the biggest themes from this game was the snap issues. And you've talked about this before with the silent count stuff and Alabama not being able to operate out of that. There were some pretty obvious offensive line struggles, especially from the center position. What was your takeaway just like from that? And then obviously, just kind of the overtime, how that was all kind of handled there at the end, especially being there.
Man, there's a lot there. I think from the snapping issues from Alabama, that's been something that's haunted them all season. I know from talking to, multiple sides, the thing, it's not just a matter of, Seth Mclaughlin just, being this bad player. I mean, look, we're looking at him in the transfer portal right now, getting attention from multiple Power 5 programs. So there's a lot that goes into that. I think it was a communication problem that just never got solved all season. And I think there's a lot of people, including Seth Mclaughlin, that was, at fault for that. But there's multiple sides to that story. But obviously that rears its ugly head again with, several low snaps, including a few that, bounced past Milroe and killed a drive. That last play was an absolute mess, Jack. I mean, if you look at it, it was like, not only was it a low snap, talking to some people, Jalen Milroe was lined up 6 yards back. I think there might have been something where he should have been 4 yards back. And if you look, break down that play, it kind of looks like he was supposed to go up and then veer to the left, and he just went straight into a wall. I think there's just a lot of panic on that play, and it just all fell apart for Alabama. And then defensively, they go from just pretty much stopping Michigan consistently to, right when it counts, letting the offense just kind of slip through their fingers on a few plays. I mean, they had Michigan at the 4th and 2 in Michigan territory. If they stop them on that play, game's pretty much over. Alabama can tick some time off the clock, and even if they're not able to kill the whole clock, they're probably going to score again and make it a 2-possession game. So just that close, there's a bunch of ways you can look at it. But I think, honestly, when you look at that game, Michigan was the team that was supposed to win. They looked like the tougher, harder team, maybe not necessarily the most talented team or the flashiest team, but they definitely outplayed Alabama and they bullied Alabama at times. And I think that, that's kind of a wake up call for Alabama. And I just think this team was kind of flawed throughout the season. And a lot of those flaws were maybe kind of taped over. And, you start getting a winning streak and you forget about the flaws, and they maybe weren't necessarily fixed. and then they exposed again at some of the worst times. So there's a lot of that needs to be fixed over the offseason, but Alabama still has a lot of pieces coming back as well.
Yeah, I mean, like that's where if you don't tape over your flaws, this is the game that they're going to get exposed in, and that's you're right. What seemed to happen, it felt like just kind of a clunky game on offense. You mentioned those drive killing plays. They had so many third and longs, especially in the beginning of the game. The fact that at the end they called 3 plays. When each team called a timeout, and that was the one they settled on, and it just
Yeah.
went. As Saban said bluntly, it didn't work. And whether or not you agree that it should have been the play call, it was, and it didn't work. So, you know, yeah, just some things not going right. I thought Seth Mclaughlin, not speaking to reporters and stuff about the snap issues was pretty telling. I mean that's as loud as however much you could actually talk about it. Uh, so yeah, it seemed like an issue that never really got solved. And yeah, just kind of a clunky game at the worst time for one. You
Yeah,
mentioned
with
like
Seth not talking to reporters, I mean, that's obviously frustrating from a
yeah,
reporter's standpoint, and it's a big story that everyone wants to know. But I do think that there's certain things that I think Seth has been kind of painted as this villain on the team, and there's certain things that he doesn't want to throw coaches and teammates and under the bus for to a certain extent. And um you got an emotional kid trying to guard some of maybe what he wants to say and some of what he doesn't want to say. And um I think that that's probably went into that decision not to talk. Like I said, it's I would have liked to hear what he had to say after the game, obviously. But yeah, it's just such a difficult situation, and when you look at it, I think it's probably a good thing that he did transfer because I think both teams needed that break. You know what I'm saying? I think
mhm,
that he needed a fresh start. I think Alabama needs to kind of figure things out itself. And but I do think that there's a lot of respect on both sides. As Alabama fans, it's real easy to pile on to Seth McLaughlin, but here's a player that Nick Saban really respects. A player that if Seth McLaughlin came to Alabama and withdrew from the portal, that Alabama would take back. And so you can dunk on him all you want, Alabama fans, but I think this is a player that really served Alabama well. And yes, he had some huge flaws, but at the same time, it's uh, it's it's tough on him as it is on anyone. And so I kind of feel for the kid and all he's kind of gone from. So we'll just have to see how Alabama moves on from that. But yeah, it was disappointing for him, and it was a disappointing kind of way to end the season as well. Just some of those flaws you thought you got over ended up no.
definitely. And you're right. I think that's good insight. Like it's easy to pile on, but it's just again, it was kind of issues that we have known about all year that just yeah they kind of they come out in the worst ways when you're playing the best opponents. So I think you're spot on with kind of Michigan just took advantage, seemed to kind of want the game more, played a lot tougher, and definitely left some Alabama left a lot on the table. And it was weird. You mentioned that fourth down, you get that stop, you maybe go down and kill a bunch of clock, go score again. You're right in being confident in that I think given the way the special teams played, it really felt the way the narrative of this game was going was, Will Reichert and James Burnip we're gonna win the game for Alabama with, Burnip's punting the ability to flip the field when the offense was just kind of continually getting stopped, and then Reichert 250-yard field goals, to give Alabama the lead to keep them in front. I thought that was going to be the story of the game because then Michigan, vice versa,
Yeah, tried to give it away, right?
yeah, botching extra points, muffing punts on the 1 yard line with 30 seconds left. You really thought that was going to be the story of the game. So that's definitely, I think, a positive from Alabama. And maybe just another example of how badly, Alabama, as any team would if they had Will Reichert, is going to miss that guy, when he departs and him leaving this year.
Yeah, both Will Reichert and James Burnip had good things to say about Connor Talty, then the next kicker coming in. But man, oh man, like that kid's gonna have so much pressure on his shoulders stepping in the shoes of Will Reichert. They talk about what the next head coach is going to have stepping in for Nick Saban. Boy, like it's not to that extent, but the way Will Reichert's viewed at the kicking position, it's like I would hate to be that next guy. The second Connor Talty misses a field goal, which is going to happen as a freshman. Um, I think that's everyone's gonna panic, and so you're not gonna have an automatic kicker right away, most likely, like you had with Will Reichert. I just think that it's gonna be a little bit different, and yeah, I think that they are definitely going to miss Will Reichert. I do think they have a good kicker, moving forward in Connor Talty. But yeah, I mean, like 250-yard field goals in the Rose Bowl, in clutch situations. I mean, that's just emblematic of what his career has been like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's gonna be missed. He's gonna be missed. Another I think bright point or bright spot in this game, and I think maybe this is a good place to segue, unless you want to just give your kind of final takeaways from Pasadena. But I mean, Justice Hayes, like this felt like a breakout game for those who didn't already know about what he can maybe give to this Alabama running game. Especially we're going to talk about kind of the roster turnover. You mentioned, they need to make some big changes in the offseason, but I think Alabama fans can be pretty confident that you are getting Roydell Williams back, which you reported, but if McClellan goes off to the league, you've got a stud here at running back in Justice Hayes, moving forward.
Yeah, Justice Hayes and Jam Miller, but in that Rose Bowl, it was definitely Justice Hayes. He looked really good. He's looked good before, and with that Rose Bowl performance, it's not quite the same thing, but it kind of brings you back to Najee Harris against Georgia in the national championship game, where the Tua came in and won. You had all those freshmen played really well. You saw that flash of him doing it on a big stage, and I think you could really see him step up next season. And even if Roydell comes back, I think Roydell would then be the favorite to land the starting job. But I think you could see a lot from Justice Haynes next year, and possibly even take over that starting job. He's that talented of a running back. Alabama's running back unit was just probably the best in the nations, or at least the deepest in the nation. And so yeah, if they do end up losing Jason McClellan, which it kind of seems like it's trending towards that, I think they'll be just fine, because I think they're going to have Justice Haynes, Jam Miller, of course, Raydell Williams, and then guys like Richard Young, who was a highly rated player in last year's class. Didn't see much of him. We could see more of him, So I think they've got plenty of depth, and that's there's some positions that we might end up talking about. Running back's not one of the ones that Alabama fans need to worry about.
Yeah, certainly. I think that was just a good point to highlight. Before we do touch on those positions, I mean, any other takeaways, just from the game impressions? Also, just your final thoughts on you were at the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. I know it didn't go the way the team you were reporting on's way, not that you have any, say in the matter or
Yeah,
rooting interest, but yeah, what were your thoughts?
the Rose Bowl is what it's built up to be. It's a beautiful venue. It's old school. It kind of seems like Disneyland for college football. I mean, it just seems like everything was just kind of magical there. Just the classic bowl stadium,
Mhm.
like without your classic old school bowl stadium. I don't know if I've ever really covered a game in one of those. That was fun. It was a perfect, California clear day, which just made things better. You had two classic teams, Alabama and Michigan, and then you had a classic game that came down to overtime. I mean, like, you couldn't have asked for a better Rose Bowl than that. I've covered a lot of college football playoff games, and they're not all as good as that. So it definitely lived up to everything it was hyped up to be, and it was a great experience. That was my first time in LA. I loved being in LA. It rained once, but other than that, the weather was perfect. I appreciated that. Um, and so it was a great game, and I think as tough as a pill as it was to swallow for Alabama, I think that there's a lot they can take from this season, and they can a lot they can take from this game. I think there's places there they know now that they really have to improve, and there's also players that look at the way that Justice Haynes look at the way that Caleb Downs looked in that game, and I think Deontay Lawson made some big plays in that game as well. Um, you're going to get both of those, all three of those guys back. There's people coming back that I think are going to be really fun to watch next season. And obviously Alabama is going to have to figure out something at the quarterback position and get more steady play through the air. But Jalen Milrow's been a really dynamic player, and if he can get locked into the Jalen Milrow that he's shown he can be, Alabama can be, a big time contender. It's going to be interesting too next season to see, how Alabama navigates having a, extended playoff, because I think that's going to, no one knows how anyone's going to do during that.
No.
So there's just a lot to look forward to, a lot to take away from that game. And I just overall, I think any Alabama fan, if they can just kind of take away the ending feeling, I think probably enjoyed themselves out there. Just, it was a great experience for me as a neutral. I'd imagine, other than the final score, a lot of Alabama fans would say the same.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I pictured when I saw Milrow kind of he was getting really animated and angry, throwing his helmet after that final play. Didn't go Alabama's way. I pictured that as the potential. That's the start of the DVD for, the championship run the following season. And Saban, like, I think summed it up best when he talked about how proud he was at how far this team got, despite, not reaching what it wanted to reach, of course, and getting to a national championship and winning one. But from where it started to where it finished, I think the improvement was immense. And you mentioned those guys that are coming back. I think there's still a lot to be excited about in 2024, even if 2023 doesn't go your way. Quick fun thing before we segue: prediction: Michigan Washington in the national championship game.
Man, that's such a tough one. First of all, because they're just like so different of offenses and, kind of different teams. Part of me wants to go Michigan. I mean, they just played bully ball. They knocked off what I felt was the best team in Alabama. So I want to pick Michigan. I think I'm going to end up picking Washington. And part of the reason why is I've doubted Washington every step of the way, that I'm just not gonna get, like, burn me. It's like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me like 3 more times, also shame on me. Like, so I can't do it anymore. Like, I'm gonna pick Michigan. I'm sorry. See, I still can't do it. I still
Yeah, I
can't.
can't even say it.
I'm going to pick Washington. Washington, the team from Seattle. I'm going to pick them to win in a close one. Michael Penix and his receivers are, they don't get talked enough about. I think Rome Odunze is maybe the best receiver in college football. I think if Washington was playing in the SEC, or they were playing in a place where they got more viewership, I think we'd be talking a lot about this offense, more so than we are. And they've already been talked about. I think people know Polk, McMillan, Odunze. People know those receivers, but I think that they would be more household names, just if it was in a more recognizable conference and a more recognizable program. So I think they've been doubted all year. This might be their year. It's been a really kind of weird year for college football, and I don't think anybody would have picked Washington to win. And so let's just keep it weird and have them win.
I'm like the opposite of where I've loved Washington all season long. Like I've picked them. I have some friends and I would do like an AP poll every week, and I continue to rank Washington like second just because I refuse to I love Washington. I love Michael Penix, but have been the opposite where I kind of feel like Michigan's gonna win it. It kind of just feels
They
like it's
could. Like,
destined.
this Michigan team is really good.
Yeah.
I thought that, so this Michigan team has a good front seven. Texas has a good front seven. It seemed like Washington was able to navigate that. That should be a good warm up. Now,
Yeah.
Michigan's going to have a better secondary than what Texas had. So that's going to be more of a test for for Penix and the receivers. But I'm not sure, any secondary stopping that one. And, Washington also has a decent defense as well. So we'll see. I think it's going to be close. I think part of it too, for Michigan's sake, is just kind of grinding out the clock and killing away some of the games. They don't want it to be a shootout at
Yeah,
all.
shootout's
If
bad.
it gets into any kind of a shootout, then Washington will win. But
Yeah.
it's not the one I predict, but it should be a fun one to watch. And look, I think when you look at it, I mean, if you can take away from, I know we're on an Alabama podcast right now, and so, like, it's not the matchup Alabama fans wanted to see, but I think it's not a bad matchup for college football. Like, I've always been an anti playoff expansion. I thought that the reason why you had 4 was to make sure that the best 2 teams played. In a normal BCS year, it would have just been Washington and Michigan. That's who would have played for the BCS
Mhm.
championship. So now we've got it. It's almost like a ball don't lie kind of thing. I mean, the 2 undefeated teams. They both now proved that they can beat big teams. I know Michigan didn't have a good schedule, but now they beat Alabama. Now they've beaten Alabama and Ohio State. They've proven that they are, worthy of playing in the national title game, and they're going to. And same with Washington. They've got 2 wins over Oregon, and a win now over Texas, and so they've proven that they deserve to be there. 2 undefeated teams. We're going to have an undefeated national title winner, and I think that's probably a good thing for college football.
I agree. I mean, I'm pro playoff expansion. We've had this conversation, but I agree that I think these are the two best teams when it's all said and done. We'll see. It'll be a fun one. I would, if I was an Alabama fan, also you do the root for the winner thing, where you should root for Michigan, so you could say you lost to the champs. But that's just the way I think about it.
I don't think that. Yeah, I think it'd be silly to I don't, how can you resent Michigan for, coming and playing? I think they played really respectfully. I don't think they were disrespectful after the loss. I don't think there's any reason why Alabama fans should root against Michigan. If anything, Michigan might be more. Which one would you say was more SEC like? You know what I'm
That's
saying?
a good point.
I don't know. Michigan.
Well, I mean, it's 2 Big Ten teams, so
yeah.
It
is 2 Big Ten. I think it's funny because I think we were all. I don't know about you. I was actually would have been 0 for 2 in my predictions of the playoff because I think I definitely had Alabama versus Texas.
I got Washington.
You just see Alabama versus Texas. Can we play for 3rd place? And just have
they should have a 3rd place. That'd be funny. I've always said they should add that to the NCAA tournament too. The 2 losers of the Final Four.
Oh man, can you imagine the opt-outs in a 3rd place game? You'd be lucky to find a 7-on-7 team for that.
That's a good point. All right. Well, yeah, we'll see. It should be fun. Let's segue though. Let's talk some off-season stuff because there has been some news, not necessarily big names coming into Alabama, per se. In the transfer portal, we've had a couple that we've covered already, but some kind of big departures, just some interesting roster turnover stuff. Tony, I know you there is no off season for you. You've already started making the depth chart for next year. And, to stay kind of on Seth Mclaughlin, you mentioned it already. He entered the portal. There's a chance he might try and test out the NFL waters. You wrote all about it. But not only him, but Terrence Ferguson also, who could have maybe been the main contender to take that center spot next year, also entered the transfer portal. So would you say that's where we're at right now, where center is glaringly the biggest need in terms of figuring out who you're going to have next year?
Yeah, I mean, because you have one true center on the team, and it's James Brockermeyer, who hasn't played very much. And, I think there's been talk of Seth Mclaughlin being too small. They had him listed at 305. He was probably closer to 295. Well, they have James Brockermeyer listed at 285. So he is a smaller offensive lineman, and he's a smart guy. He's going to be able to do a lot of the things that Seth can do in terms of setting up the offense from the center position and calling out blocking schemes and stuff like that. But, he does need to add some weight. And if he's going to be the guy, or you got to bring in another experienced center. And the thing is, look at the attention that Seth McLaughlin's gotten in the transfer portal. There aren't just a ton of available centers in the portal. So it's really kind of hard to find that guy. And now maybe, if I'm a center and I want to go play for a national title and, I want to make some extra money, I might leave now because, it's not like Alabama's need at center is a secret, right? So even if there isn't a person in the portal, there might be some that goes into the portal and contacts Alabama and say, hey, I could be your starting center, So it's not just Alabama calling out to people. A lot of times it's kind of Alabama. Some team, some players might see the opportunity at Alabama and want to pounce. Right now in the portal, I don't think there's any names that really fit for that position, but we're still early. I think we could still see some guys join. But I do think that James Brockermeyer, if nothing else, will get a shot at it. And you talk about guys that have been super patient throughout their career. I mean, that guy, a lot of people felt like, he was just coming to Alabama because Tommy Brockermeyer, his brother, was a 5-star. He's plugged away. He's made it. He's, kind of stuck with the team. And, he might be the offense, the Brockermeyer that gets to start for Alabama. And that'd be such a great story for him. He's always been such an afterthought and been unfairly overshadowed by his brother. He's a hard worker. He's a 4-star recruit, I think, in his own right. So he's a solid player himself. It's just always been overshadowed. It'd be really nice to see him kind of work his way into that starting spot. I think that'd be kind of a fun thing to see. But we'll have to see, regardless of whether or not James Brockermeyer goes, I think they need another center to compete with him. If you look, Terrence Ferguson was one of the guys that you would have thought maybe took over that center role. He didn't play center at Alabama, but he kind of worked there in practice. He was one of the guys that they would use in terms of like, when they're doing reps, when they really went into the depth of when you had the quarterback center reps before practice, you'd always see him snapping to the quarterbacks. Rock Montgomery's another guy that didn't really play much. He's an interior lineman that was involved, kind of like what Terrence Ferguson did. Currently, I think you'd have to throw him in the mix with James Brockermeyer. But like I said, I really think you need to bring in somebody that's capable of competing for the starting center position. And another thing too that I find really interesting, if you move James Brockermeyer, let's just project him as a starting center. None of Alabama's backup options at offensive line, all of them are freshmen, either redshirt freshmen or true freshmen, and that's scary in its own right. I mean, one of these guys might get hurt, and then all of a sudden you're throwing in a freshman to plug the hole. That is not really necessarily what you want. So just it's hard to find depth pieces in the portal. I don't think anybody wants to go from being a bench player somewhere else to being a bench player at Alabama. Like, that's not why you enter the portal. But, I think if Alabama can establish depth through bringing in people to compete for starting spots, I think that's where they look. So you have one of those at center where you can bring in an interior lineman or somebody with snapping experience to compete with James Brockermeyer. And I think you have one at tackle as well. I know they brought in Nikhil Bertrand from Texas A&M. He's a guy that didn't play his first year with the Aggies, but he'll have depth on the outside. And I think you might want to bring in another veteran guy that has more experience to compete with Elijah Pritchett for that spot, because Elijah Pritchett's the guy that was the top offensive tackle in the class 2 years ago, but he didn't really beat out Caden Proctor for the job, and he's a guy with his own right that's had a bunch of distractions and a bunch of red flags over the last month. He flirted with entering the transfer portal and then gets arrested. So you really kind of don't know exactly what you have with Elijah. I think I'm not expecting any of those to kind of prevent him from taking the starting job, but I don't think you feel as comfortable with him being your really only experienced option at that position as you did maybe a month or so ago. So I would say you probably want to make at least two further additions on the offensive line, just to get some depth and just to get some competition, so that you feel a little bit better about if somebody goes down. I think you feel good about right now. You feel good about Caden Proctor. You feel good about Tyler Booker. You feel good about Jaden Roberts. After that, it's really a lot of question marks.
Yeah, that's a scary sight. Some big shoes to fill in a big position, literally, along Alabama's offensive line. So we'll see what they do there. Of all the guys, I mean, we mentioned Mclaughlin and Ferguson. Obviously, we're recording on Thursday. We had Wednesday, I think, like 9 guys enter the portal all in one day. Are you surprised by anybody who's gone in so far? And then, maybe on either side of the ball, who are some players that you maybe could be speculating that could be on the fringes and maybe on their way out of Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I mean, starting with the people that I'm surprised that went into the portal, you got to look first at Ferguson. I think, unless he just wasn't going to play center or just had no interest in doing that, then yeah, maybe I see it. Because if he's just dead set on staying at guard, then yeah, he's probably not going to beat out Tyler Booker or Jaden Roberts. So like that makes sense. But I thought he had the position, the opportunity to switch to center, which would have given him a starting spot. So that was a surprise. I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, a guy like Earl Little Jr. is someone that you would, in spring last season, he was kind of with the first team defense. Then he just kind of lost his role a little bit. I would have thought maybe that, he would be a guy that you would think would want to kind of compete for all the transition that's happening in the secondary. And then you've got, Christian Story, who has one more year of eligibility. I was really kind of shocked to see him go because, you're losing Jalen Key, and maybe that's his opportunity to step up and start there. And so that kind of creates a hole at, the safety position. It's looking like Malachi Moore is going to come back. So does he take the star position, or does he take the safety position? We'll have to see. Alabama's got options. They've got guys like Devontae Smith, who was dealing with a foot injury, but he was somebody that, during fall camp looked promising. They've got Jake Pope, who's kind of hung around, is a really solid option that's never really had his shot at Alabama, but is a guy that could really kind of play. So one of those two guys, and then I think they might bring somebody in the portal there too as well. I mean, we saw what happened last spring. Even after spring camp, they brought in Trey Amos and Jalen Key, and both those guys ended up playing huge roles. So I wouldn't be surprised if they make a move in the secondary. When you look at linebacker, it's really big to get Deontay Lawson back. We'll see what they do with Tresman Marshall, but if they have Deontay Lawson and Jahad Campbell, I think they're in good shape there. I think you're going to see a lot of transition in terms of people leaving the linebacker. I think the last time I counted, I think there's like 18 or 20 or something like that. There's so many in just we're counting the Sam and Jack linebackers as well, but there's so many of those guys that you would expect, some of those guys to transfer. Obviously, Alabama's losing, from the outside linebacker standpoint, you're losing Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner. You're getting back Quindarius Robinson, who's going to be probably the leader of that edge rushing group. But you're probably going to need someone like, Keon Keeley or Yanzi Pierre or Quay Russaw. All three of those guys didn't play their freshman year, but, they're all 5-star caliber kids. I think they're going to come in. One of them, I expect to kind of come in and maybe take a starting role, even though they didn't play much or at all in their first season. But there's other guys too that I think, you might see transfer. I don't want to speak that on anyone, but if you look at a guy like, and I'm just throwing out names here that I'm kind of looking through the depth chart. A guy like Ian Jackson's going to be a redshirt junior, did not play much, has not played much. Don't necessarily see him going above, Jahad Campbell or Deontay Lawson or, Tresman Marshall if he comes back. Like, you start losing your spot on the depth chart. I think those kids might have a decision to make of, maybe they want to stay at Alabama, but also maybe they want to try to pursue more, more playing time somewhere else. So it just, that there's plenty of names on the list. Jordan Jefferson came from JUCO, did a lot on special teams, didn't do much on on defense. I think, does he want in his final year? Does he want to go somewhere?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them because some of the people that Alabama brought in some of those positions as freshmen, they're good. You got guys like Sterling Dixon who's going to compete for depth time, and so it's just, I think it's just balancing roster management. I mean, Alabama's not going to carry 18 linebackers, so something's going to happen, right? And on the defensive line, I think there's some players too. Obviously, they lost Justin Aboigbe today. I think bringing in LT Overton from Texas A&M, as long as they can get him to get up back to around 285, 290. He lost some weight to go to Texas A&M, got down to like 265. So if he can pack that weight back on, I think he could go a long way towards, replacing Justin Aboigbe. And it's looking like Tim Smith might be back as well. So you've got some depth on the defensive line. That's going to be, interesting. I think when you look at the defensive side of the ball, it's really kind of filling out that secondary, getting maybe another experienced guy to throw in there, and then, making sure that pass rush with the edge rushers, making sure one of, like I said, Keon Keeley, Yanzi Pierre, Quay Russaw, one of those guys is ready to pair with Quindarius Robinson. If they do that, they should have a pretty good defense.
Yeah. I think it's holes, but they're relatively fillable is what it kind of sounds like. If you just, can construct, maybe hope that you get some guys back. Kind of what are your early takeaways on the offensive side of the ball away from the O-line? Maybe, we touched on running back position, not being too worried. I know there's a couple receivers in the portal, probably going to lose Jermaine Burton to the NFL draft. Is Alabama good there? I know there's like 7 tight ends on this roster that probably aren't all going to be able to see the field for that position. So, what are your takeaways there for offense?
Yeah, I would expect a tight end to leave. I don't think they're going to carry 7, so it might be 6, might be 5. They could have 2 leave, I think, maybe. I think the biggest, if you ask for my takeaways, though, I don't want to bogged down with a huge explanation like I did on defense. Look, I think the first thing that stands out is Ty Simpson's coming back. That's interesting. I would have thought he would have left. I mean, you've got Jalen Milroe, who, I think a lot of people, at least a few weeks ago, were saying would be the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy award to begin the season. He's coming back, and Ty Simpson's still coming back. I wonder if that quarterback position is not as locked down as maybe one would think. I think it's still Jalen's job, but a guy like Ty Simpson, I know he really loves Alabama, but at the same time, I think he probably feels like if Jalen can't progress as a passer, maybe he could make things interesting. And I think, I think it's probably a decent gamble by Ty Simpson, because at the very least, he just loses one more year, but gets to develop with Alabama. He's always one play away from coming in for Jalen Milroe. And then, who knows? I mean, I still think that there's some development as a passer that Jalen has to make, and I think he can make it. And I think he's definitely the favorite. And I would say that, if I was betting any kind of money, I would definitely put it on Jalen Hurts to win the starting job.
You mean Jalen Milroe?
What?
Oh, you said
yeah.
Hurts.
Sorry,
we're throwing it back.
My bad. Yeah. I would definitely bet on Jalen Milroe to win the job, but I don't. I think if that progression doesn't happen the way that Alabama and Jalen want it to, that Ty Simpson could maybe make a push, and maybe at the end of spring camp, we're scratching our heads, are kind of looking forward to another quarterback battle. I don't necessarily know, or I'm not really like willing to say that that's going to happen, but it wouldn't necessarily surprise me at this point. So that's something to watch. I think when you look at some of the skill players, the biggest thing for me is, will Alabama hold on to the commitment of Ryan Williams? Because I think he could be a game changer at receiver, and I think they will. And if he does, I think that, I put Ryan Williams as a starter, even though he's a freshman. I think he's the only freshman I'll put as a starter in my depth chart. But I think he's somebody that can definitely make a difference for Alabama. I think, he can provide that home run threat. Probably put him on the slot. And look, Alabama, has, I think, 4 really just big play, like deadly guys, where you could have Isaiah Bond. Of course, I think Isaiah Bond kind of comes back as that leading receiver. You also return Kendrick Law, who just helped the offense in so many different ways last year. Then you've got Ryan Williams or Kobe Prentice, 2 guys that are just like lightning fast, that can really be big threats through the slot position. And you've got guys too that are like bigger guys. They lost Malik Benson, the JUCO transfer, was one of their best blockers at the wide receiver position. But then they have Jalen Hale, who's coming into a sophomore year. He played a little bit as a freshman, and he's another big body guy that blocks well on the perimeter, that can also make some big plays. We saw that touchdown catch he made against Ole Miss. So I think they really loaded at the receiver position, but adding that guy and Ryan Williams to kind of like be that extra piece, I think that's going to be big. And if they don't somehow land Ryan Williams, I wouldn't be surprised if they pursue the portal for like an elite option, not just a depth option. I think they've got plenty of receivers, but if they really want that home run kind of hitting guy, they might pursue that. But I don't necessarily see that happening if they get Ryan Williams, because he's such a difference maker. I personally think that happens, and they hold off Auburn and Texas. It's going to be close, but I think things are trending towards Alabama holding on to him. And so that'll be a big get, and that'll be somebody that Alabama fans should be definitely really excited about.
Yeah, we'll talk to Brandon about him too, and see kind of where all that is at. Any final takeaways, Tony? Just
Just
early impressions.
Alabama fans, it's never as bad as it seems, and I think that this team has a lot of potential. Like I said, it just got to figure out things at the quarterback position, and I think a lot of teams would, chop off their, right arm to, to have a quarterback like Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson competing, possibly, or just having the quarterback room that Alabama has. We didn't even talk about Dylan Lonergan or the 5-star freshman Julian Sayin that's coming in. So really talented quarterback position. I think it just kind of boils down to that. If Alabama can establish that quarterback position, and they certainly have the pieces to do so, I think we could be talking about another title contending team next season. It's just there's some flaws on this team that need to be fixed, but I think they're fixable.
Yeah, got exposed a little bit against Michigan. Now you kind of rebuild and reload, and I think Milrow, yeah, if everything goes right, that I could be right in my prediction that starts the championship DVD.
Sure.
We'll see
Yeah,
what
I
happens.
definitely, and I think he's gonna get some of those doubters again, and I think that that's
Yeah,
going to fuel him, and it's just all about how he responds, how the offense responds. Jalen's a kid that's done a really good job of responding when people wanted to count him out, and I think you're gonna start to see, like we even talked about him possibly being replaced. So like I think he's gonna see things like that, and I think he's going to see some of that criticism, and if he can respond, I think that there's an NFL quarterback in there if he can build up the way he's supposed to build up. And if he follows suit and is able to kind of respond in the way that I think he's capable of, he could be a really exciting player. And I think that that will be a really exciting thing for Alabama next year as well.
definitely. All right. Thank you, Tony, for the recap. Sorry you couldn't stay in LA for longer, or that you have to make the drive back to T Town instead of being in town for Houston for the national championship. But we'll see if Alabama, what goes on. We'll obviously have next week any developments. There will be some, no doubt.
Sure. Yeah.
Whether it's guys entering the draft portal, what have you. So we'll break all that down. With that, we will segue. Okay, we're finishing off the show. We've got Jordan talk some Alabama men's basketball. Jordan, get this out of the way first, though. As a Bama guy, I know you're on to talk hoops, and we will dive into it. But if you have any takeaways from the Rose Bowl, we were just talking to Tony. I'm sure you were watching. Frustrating game, obviously, for the Crimson Tide, not being able to get things done against the old Block M of Michigan.
Yeah, it was a very rough watch to have to see that go down the last 5 minutes of the game. But overall, you always point or look at the key moments of the game, and those are kind of magnified a lot more than what happened throughout the game. And I thought Alabama, after they got put on the deck pretty early, not score wise, but they got mauled the first half. I mean, you saw how big of a yardage. I think it was like 199 to 38. Well, sack yards goes into that, but Alabama couldn't do anything offensively. And they were really struggling to stop Michigan. And I mean, everybody talked about it all week. It was going to be one in the trenches. And I thought it was a back and forth boxing match. Michigan got out early, then Alabama fought back in the third quarter, and then Michigan kind of got the last say. But it was fun football to watch, just like the second game of that night or that day was as well. It's kind of different feel. But overall, there were a lot of mistakes on both ends. Alabama couldn't overcome the sacks, the poor snaps. I know are a big topic right now. But hey, Alabama has nobody to blame but themselves. They had the ball with 5 minutes left. Could have ran out the clock. Could have went in and scored a touchdown. They did get a field goal to put it up at 7. Just could have put the game away. And even though they didn't you still had the defensive unit on the field in a 2-minute situation and just got shredded. They got it in a third down, and they let a running back leak out, busted coverage, 35, 40-yard gain, and then a big pass play, and next thing you know, they score. And then Alabama had a chance, didn't score, went to overtime, obviously. Everybody knows how that ended, but it was a great season, I thought. I didn't expect it. I don't think a lot of people did, but I mean, really, it was a rough game to watch the final 5 minutes and on, and it's going to be something that's going to sting for Alabama fans, knowing that's what the first semifinal game that they've lost. So it not making the national championship after making the playoffs is something not accustomed to Alabama fans. But I overall was really proud, and I think they'll bring a good group back next year along with the freshman class, and they're already working hard on the portal.
Oh yeah, agreed. And it was their last chance at a national championship in the four team. So now it's going to expand. See how they deal with that. Let's go to a game that there was not nearly as much of a struggle for the Crimson Tide on the hardwood against a good Liberty team. I think you and I talked about this the last time you came on. We were looking ahead a little bit at this game, but Alabama just ran Liberty out of the gym, 101 to 56. What were your takeaways on that? Obviously, a nice, certainly that game, and then Eastern Kentucky too. You can pile on that, a nice pair of games to get you two let's just say comfortable wins heading into conference play. What were your thoughts on those, or on that Liberty game?
Yeah, so I said before, these are some get-right games for Alabama after the tough gauntlet. I told you that Eastern Kentucky was one of the worst teams. I mean, I didn't even realize at the time that they were projected to win their conference or predicted
Yeah, me
to
neither.
preseason. I just look at their KenPom, and they are, in the 260s, 270s, and there's only, 350 teams in the country. So obviously that's probably strength of record, strength of schedule, stuff like that. But I knew they weren't very good, and Alabama made them look that way. Beat them by, 54, something like 44, something like that. So it was never in doubt, and it was a good get-right game. I can't remember how many, 18 or 19, and they were just firing on all cylinders. Overall, good game for Rylan Griffin. He had 19 points. He really needed to get going offensively. It was just a good game all around for everybody. Just kind of glaze over that and go to the Liberty game. But Liberty is a quality opponent. I do think that they will more likely win their conference. They'll probably be in the NCAA tournament. They're that good. You wouldn't know it by watching that game against Alabama, beating them by 45. But overall, it's just Alabama's athleticism and size really just it made Liberty borderline useless on whatever they could do defensively and offensively. Alabama had their way on both ends. Latrell Wrightsell had his big breakout game for Alabama in Birmingham, 5 of 7 shooting from 3. And then you got contribution for pretty much everybody. Everybody had a very efficient shooting game, which is what you want to see going into SEC play, which we'll probably cover here in a second. But I thought they got back to their roots. I thought they got back to the dribble drive offense that Nate Oates loves to do. He was running some more sets up top, like some ram sets, like pin down screens to get guys open up top, and then really coming off those screens hard, full speed downhill, and got Aaron Estrada in a lot of those situations where he would come around a down screen on the wing and catch the ball as he's driving down the free throw line, and you can't stop him or Mark Sears as they're going downhill. You just can't. And they scored a lot off that. And whether it wasn't on the layup, they had to help more off the corner, and that's where Latrell Wrightsell made his living that day on those corner threes. So I think they're starting to find a rhythm offensively, and defensively, it's just going to be a grind every day. You're not going to see any improvement, I don't think, defensively. It's going to be just, can they keep their effort and intensity up game to game? Because that's definitely going to be the weakness for this team. It's just, can they maintain their intensity they had the past 2 games?
Yeah.
So that'll be very interesting to see the first couple games in SEC play when the competition goes back up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a good thing, the way you described it, and that he's using some more of those pin downs, getting those guys, Sears and Estrada involved on those like wraparound screens, getting them downhill. And it seems like it's reflected in the 3-point shooting. I mean, they took 28 threes, which for Alabama is almost a little bit on the lower end. So, you find that balance. If you can do that in conference play and score and get, Sears and Estrada, especially moving downhill the way they're doing. And then, you get it opens up the floor for you. You get those kickouts all of a sudden. Guys like Latrell Wrightsell, Rylan Griffin, other guys, become way more impactful. Just shooting pull-up jumpers. Like, I think, I think it shows how dynamic their offense can be. Certainly KenPom has reflected that all season. But yeah, 2 just very quality, or not, I guess not as quality, but just nice wins to get heading into what, is a fairly positive, or at least easy on paper start, at least to me, in SEC play. I kind of want your take on this. I mean, this team opens up with Vanderbilt here on January 6th, 2:30 p.m. They're on the road, but opening up with Vanderbilt, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and then Missouri in your first 4 games. Well, we'll dive into. I have specific numbers and names to throw at you about Vanderbilt. Is that a 4-0 start to SEC play in your eyes? Should that be a 4-0 start to SEC play for this Alabama team?
3-1 at the worst. The Mississippi State game on the road is going to be a very big swing game for me. Yeah. Just because Mississippi State has done really well to start the season, but they still have really, really bad losses to Georgia Tech and Southern. I don't know how they lose those games, but they do have Tolu Smith back, which is going to be a big benefit to them and a big boost to their front court. And Alabama has kind of had trouble with him in the past, and he gets to the free throw line a lot. We foul him a lot, and it's going to be one of those to where they don't have any shooters around them, and they're just going to have to force feed them inside. And Alabama's really going to have to protect the paint. And as bad as Alabama's been getting in foul trouble with their guys down low, it's going to be a struggle for them. But against Vandy is close to Eastern Kentucky and the Ken Palm. They're down in the 200s, so obviously that is it definitely should be a win, and anything more or less than that would be a big disappointment and upset. But South Carolina's 12-1. They've won a lot coming off the start of the season. They really lost their one game that they, the biggest competition, I guess that you could say, on their schedule. So them coming to the Coleman Coliseum, I expect Alabama to probably win that game and kind of expose South Carolina. Alabama's, even though last year Brandon Miller, all that happened and it was an overtime game, Alabama's really had their way with South Carolina the past few years after a lot of struggles during the Avery Johnson era. But I expect a 3-1 start. Missouri at home, you expect to win those home games. Missouri, I'm not sure how good they really are. They've shown that they can be solid, but they've shown they can be mediocre as well. So everybody gets exposed or really get brought to light in conference play. And I think that's where Alabama's really going to shine, in my opinion. They had the tough stretch against the 3 top 10 teams, and you're seeing Ohio State. I believe they're 13-1 or 12-1, and Clemson has been really, really good. Alabama didn't lose in those slouches, so they don't have any bad losses. So I expect them to kick it up a notch. You're starting to see them round into form offensively, and based on this top, first 4 games, I expect 3-1 at a minimum.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I agree with you on the swing game factor. The prove it, everyone's going to, it's going to be prove it one way or another. Seems like it's going to hit the SEC almost harder than any other conference, just when you look at it overall. Like, there's a lot of these teams, the South Carolinas, the Ole Misses, Mississippi State to some extent. Yeah, Georgia at 10-3. Who seem a lot worse on paper than some of these teams like Alabama at 8-5, Arkansas at 9-4.
Georgia's not good, I promise.
A&M, yeah, and it's definitely gonna, it's gonna be a prove it kind of first stretch. So that's why I think a strong start, kind of, does a lot for you in terms of setting yourself up when you do get into some of these more difficult games. Because I think we're going to be talking in late February, early March, really kind of stressing about some of the opponents Alabama's got to face to end the season, with Kentucky down there, Florida twice, and a Tennessee team. So yeah, I think you get a productive start in conference play. And you've got the scheduling creators kind of favoring you, even with Vanderbilt on the road. You mentioned the Ken Palm, they're 205 officially in Ken Palm. The glaring stat I really saw, they are 347th in the nation in scoring. They average about 68 points a game. Obviously, Alabama averages a lot more than that. This Vanderbilt team's lost 4 of its last 5. Player I will point out for Vanderbilt, they've got a 5th year in Ezra Manjon. He leads them in scoring, assists, and steals. Some of the specifics there. I don't know how much Vanderbilt basketball you've watched, but maybe do you expect? I would assume another pretty resounding blowout win overall. Maybe, and if you have anything on Vanderbilt in terms of how they could hurt Bama, feel free. But that's, what are you thinking?
Have the inside presence that they've had in the past. It's really guard heavy. They've had some good forwards in the past, really high energy guys that can shoot from outside and inside as well. I can't think of the guy last year that was down low for him. He was hurt on and off last year.
It was Liam Robbins.
Yeah. I think he came back for the Alabama game, or he had to miss on the one in Nashville where they got blown out. But they don't have that guy anymore. And Mannion, I'm a big fan of his as well. And they're going to have to make a lot of threes. You know how Jerry Stackhouse likes to play. They like to play fast. They want to shoot a lot of threes, but they're just not very good at it. So they're going to have a heroic effort shooting the ball in order to stay close, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So it'll be an interesting start. That game again at 2:30 on SEC Network. Jordan, I want to ask you this, kind of broadening it out again. You know, when you're reflecting on the non-con, you know, you've mentioned all these good teams that Alabama's played. Certainly, Ohio State and Clemson have proved to even be better than, you know, we knew they were going into those games. Looking at this team, give me, you know, let's say two guys who have really impressed you that you're maybe kind of stock is rising, and then two that you maybe want to see more from on this Alabama roster, whether it's some of these starters, rotation guys, whomever, in your observations of the through non-con so far.
Yeah, but two that's really I think are on the rise. One of them is Muhammad Wagi. I think that he's starting to really find his role on this team, and he's been starting. I mean, him and Pringle's been splitting minutes pretty much at the 5, mainly because they both get in foul trouble so quick. But Wagi's been that high energy dude that they've all. I don't know if you've ever watched Alabama basketball when they had Dante Hall, guys like twitchy guys that go up and catch alley-oops, defend the rim a little bit. No, he's not a great shot blocker, but he's capable. And I think he's really comfortable after coming off that injury early in the season. And you're seeing him get involved early on the scoring end. And he plays tough defense. He just doesn't move his feet well, just like Nick Pringle doesn't. And that's what kind of gets them in trouble against more crafty big guys. But I think that he's really showing rounding into form. And one guy that I think to round into form is someone that we expected to blow up early on, and that's Aaron Estrada. And he really excelled early against the lower competition, similar to Grant Nelson did. And then they kind of hit that lull, started playing Ohio State, Oregon, Clemson, and then the big three in the gauntlet, and they kind of just struggled. But now you're starting to see Aaron Estrada start to kind of get comfortable again. These were two big get-right games, lower competition, similar to what he was dominating early on, but he didn't really have a triple-double last game. And I think he's starting to let the game come to him. You're not seeing him take bad threes like he has in bigger games this year, or rushing shots. He's starting to let it come to him, starting to be a playmaker when he needs to be. He's one of the fastest guys on the court. He's one of the best passers on the court, and he needs to be that. And he's starting to become a more complete player because of it, rebounding, assist, and scoring when he needs to. Two guys that need to step up. One is going to be Grant Nelson. I've been pretty disappointed with him overall. He's had his flashes. He's been a flash player so far. And I think a lot of it is if he's not shooting the ball well, it tends to kind of take over the rest of his game. And he doesn't trust himself if his shot's not falling defensively as well. He has to be a dude for Alabama to succeed and to reach the goals they want to. Now, I'm not expecting him to go 5 of 10 or 5 or 11 from 3, but against Liberty, you saw him play the 5 a good amount, and he was dominating guys down. He was taking them off the dribble. I love putting him in the corner, on the wing, and kind of running a high pick and roll with him handling the ball to get mismatches. And I think he can be a big-time playmaking 5. Their offensive efficiencies, I believe it's like 1.35 points per possession when he's at the 5. I mean, everything just flows so much better. And along with him, I would probably say Rylan Griffin. I was kind of in between when you were asking that, because Rylan Griffin, I think, is coming on, but I want to see more. He's starting to score the ball more. He looked so comfortable shooting the ball against Eastern Kentucky. Had a season high in points. He looked good against Liberty. He just needs to play without thinking. I mean, that's his thing. I think he thinks too much, and he's been Nate Oates to get onto him. You'll see him where he thinks too much when he gets a catch and shoot wide open, and he hesitates, and he's able to pass out of it. He just needs to play without thinking, let the game flow come to him, he's super talented on both ends, and Alabama has to have him too. So those are kind of two guys that I'm hoping I see more out of come SEC play, because Alabama's going to need them for sure.
Yeah, Nelson is such a conundrum to me. I agree with you with Rylan, where it's like it's going in the right direction. So that's one that it's like, you're not as worried about. It is so interesting because I don't think it's not that Oates necessarily doesn't know how to use him. I think he's good at so many things, and so you kind of need him to be a lot of things at once. And a guy who is, yes, it was a very high, level, highly rated transfer. A guy like that's going to struggle to figure all of that out so fast in a with better competition that he's going up against in a new team, a new system. So I think, it's how can he figure that out, and how can Oates kind of figure out, okay, is he best as a small ball 5? How can we rotate him where he can play that for a majority of the game, but also not be in foul trouble? How can we get to where, like you said, I like when he spots up on the wing and uses those pick and rolls to draw mismatches. And I think he's a decent rebounder. I think he could be a very plus defender for this team. He can be so many things, is like my point. He plays he's like a point forward sometimes. They have him bring the ball up. Like it's like he's so much of a tweener that they just are still kind of, it seems like, trying to figure out where he fits in. But if that clicks, I mean, you're right. He can be an absolute dude. He's shown that, in fits and spurts this year.
He's got a mixture of several players that I can think of in the past. He's got a little Herb Jones point forward to him where he's 6'10". Herb said it showed that he was 6'8", but he was closer to 6'10". That dude was taller than what they said. But 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", whatever. He's got point guard skills.
Yeah.
And then you got Noah Clowney ability on the outside. I mean, Noah Clowney could take guys off the dribble, and he can spot up. So can Noah Clowney. And he also had the passing ability of Herb as well. I think he's a very underrated passer. He's led the team in assists in 2 games this year at 6'11". So yeah, he's a Swiss Army knife, and a lot of times those guys kind of go under the radar because you want to use them in so many ways, but it just doesn't work every single game or all the time. That you really have to just find a niche that he's good at and just go with it until it stops, and then find something else. And I think that's what they're going to have to do. I love him at the 5. I love him at the 5, but he can't play it all the time due to defensive inefficiencies.
Yeah, agreed. I agree 100%. It would help if, they had a Charles Bediako, and then you don't worry about that 5. Then you're like, all right, Charles can worry about the defense. He can take the defense. You do this and other things. So it's, it's about figuring out your kinks, but it's a good problem to have, I guess, is the overall,
both those kind of players.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot, I think, to be positive about. Guile, I think I'll obviously throw in as who I've been impressed with, but I think I'm glad you didn't say him, because I think you wanted this and expected this. Is obviously Mark Sears. I think he's, it's been my take that I think he's going to be a first team All-SEC player, and I think if he keeps up what he's doing, he's going to be. I mean, it's him and Estrada, that very well could wind up being the best backcourt in the league. I don't think that's an outrageous statement.
There is an avenue if Alabama finishes top 4 that he is, or could be, the SEC Player of the Year. He's a top 10 player in the country based on efficiency of KenPom. Think of that. He's top 10 player in the country. So, of course, he's probably going to be the best player in the SEC.
Yeah.
So, he's a guy that Alabama has to have ball out every single game. If not, they're going to have a very balanced effort.
Yeah, definitely. Jordan, any last takeaways from a recap of non-con, preview to SEC, maybe an SEC matchup you're looking forward to, down the line?
I am super pumped for SEC play. I like conference play and when it starts more than March Madness itself. And that sounds crazy, but March Madness, there is so much going on at one time. It's hard, it's overwhelming. And I think that's why everybody is so just blown away by it. You got 10 games going off and on all day for 2 or 4 days. SEC conference play, you can just sit back, you can watch 2 games at once, and then go to the nightcap and watch 2 games, and they're always so high level. Majority of them, you'll have some that are blowouts, but SEC play, everybody plays like their hair's on fire majority of the times. Upsets galore. It's always tough to go on the road. I love watching ranked teams or really good teams go on the road to, like, back when, Kentucky would go to Ole Miss and Ole Miss would be okay and then Kentucky would be elite and then just get upset. I mean, just random stuff like that. I love watching on a Tuesday night, So I'm excited. I think one big game that I'm super excited about is going to be Alabama at Tennessee, the fifth game. We didn't talk about that because it was the fifth game of the conference slate, but Tennessee's solid. Alabama really needs a high quality win on their resume. That's going to be the first chance because you got that, and then you got the big Iron Bowl of basketball coming in on Wednesday in Coleman Coliseum. So that's two big games back to back, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be a fun stretch. I chose to ignore that because that's a little bit less favorable theoretically. I'm just kidding, but yeah, we'll see what pops up. I agree with you. The randomness is very fun. It's very fun. I mean, I went to Mizzou, and I remember when a number 1 Auburn team marched in there and looked not like the number 1 team, and it was a 1-point game, and that's just how it is when teams go on the road. It's
these lower teams just play with their hair on fire. The crowd's into it, just like South Carolina and Bama last year. Nobody expected that. I mean, it's fun to watch, even when you're the team that's probably getting upset. I mean, it's infuriating at times, but that's just college basketball. That's what makes it awesome.
Oh yeah, that's what makes it great. Well, we'll see. So again, 2:30 on Saturday, Bama Vanderbilt getting conference play started. Jordan, thank you. And with that, we will actually finish the show off. So hope everyone enjoyed. We will be back next week. We'll have some more recruiting updates from Brandon for football. Talk to Tony, I'm sure, with more football drama, as now we're in off-season mode. And then Jordan, I'm sure you'll be back on to kind of recap and keep it rolling with us here through SEC play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it goes down. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back next week.